Hey everybody, Andrew Hogue here, your security, privacy, and forensics expert. And I'm back working on a simple Hacker News client using GitHub Copilot. In my last session, I used GitHub Copilot Chat, which is in preview, to figure out how to add the Firebase SDK to my iOS app. Since that appears to be up and running, I want to see if I can fetch data from Hacker News to Firebase API. I'm going to leave these sessions unedited so people can see what it's really like to work your way through coding. All right, let's dive right in. So I thought about this a little bit since this morning, and the first thing that I want to do is actually take a look at the Hacker News API. So they've got a GitHub repo out here, and the documentation's pretty light. They don't actually give you a sample on how to connect with Firebase. You could basically just connect over HTTP, but they do encourage you to use Firebase because it's more efficient over the network, and I think it's just easier on that back end. They give you some descriptions of, for example, what an item looks like and what it could possibly have. And items really differ based on like whether it's a story, a comment, things of that sort. So we've got some idea of the data structures out here. And if you come down here under live data, which is what they're really excited about, we can go out there and efficiently query like what's the latest max item. So this would be the latest story submitted. So I'll just click on that link real quick. So it's going to be this integer number up here. You can also look at the news stories, the top stories, things of that sort. And that just comes back as an array of integers. And then they have another one where it's going to actually come back as an object with items and profiles. So this over here is what the top stories JSON looks like when you make the call. And so what I'm thinking about as a new Swift programmer is, okay, I probably need to create a model to represent that. Now it's going to be the simplest model or struct in the world because it's just an array of integers. There's probably some level of abstraction that I should be considering, but I'm going to get distracted and go down a rabbit hole there. So I'm just going to kind of keep it very simple. And then I need to think about an object to represent an actual story. So I tinkered around with this a little bit. Again, I'm trying to figure out the interplay between VS Code and Xcode, or really Xcode and any other external editor. Because right now GitHub Copilot isn't natively integrated into Xcode, it's really something where you have to use a different editor to get the full power of it. I traditionally use NeoVim. Right now I'm using VS Code as basically a first-time user of that because that's where the technical preview is available for the GitHub Copilot Chat feature. And so what I did in the earlier experimentation was I created the file in VS Code versus Xcode. And the short answer is just create it in Xcode. You're going to have Xcode recognize it in the project, and then it's going to create those like standard headers at the top. And then you can just pop over to your other editor and start editing from there. So let me show you how that works. Okay, so I'm over here and I've created a basic folder structure. I've got a model view where we'll put our API calls and logic, and then a view layer. And inside the view layer, I had previously created views for the UI that I put together, which I'll just undo the preview here real quick. And so basically you can pull in news events. There should actually be a bar at the bottom there. There we go. You can actually pull in like the top news. I'll probably end up changing that to news in general, and then ultimately I want to create like a tab at the top where you could flip through the different types of news, a basic search, an account tab, and then settings. So from here I realized that I probably really should just start with a model, and at first the model that I created was going to be for a story, and I'll show you that in a second. But then I realized, well, actually I want to get the top items first, or the top stories first. So that's just going to be an array of integers. And then each one of those would become a story. Okay, so I'm just going to create two models here. So the first one is just going to be a new Swift file. Click next, and then let's call this top stories. And then the next one will be just story. Okay, so we've got these two things created, and now I'm going to pop over to VS Code. Now, the top stories is, again, it's just going to be a simple struct with an array of integers. And actually, as I was just saying that, this popped up. So we've got top stories. It's codable, which means when the JSON comes back, we can decode that. Top stories is an array of integers, and then it threw in an enumeration with some logic behind if I guess if it's a top story, then you pass top stories through. So if you look at that, well, first of all, I'm going to accept that. I'm not sure if I want the enum at this point, but I'm just going to keep it there. So if you come back to the documentation, you'll see that's probably been popped in there from some other Hacker News clients that have been open sourced, because if you want to go through some of the different endpoints here, you can swap out like top stories, news stories, best stories, and other types of stories that are out there. So I see why it's put in there, but again, now I'm just going to keep it for now. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. I was used to autosave, I guess, in Xcode, so just you need to make sure that you save things over here. And then I'm going to come over to Story. And what's happening is that I'm thinking about what I want to prompt GitHub Copilot to do, and then it ends up doing it. So hopefully there'll come a point where maybe I'm working on apps that are not already open sourced effectively, and then I can be more thoughtful about my prompts. But these things just keep auto-completing. I wouldn't say that Copilot right now is super fast. It's not super slow. The chat was a little bit slower, but again, these are in technical, preview right now, beta. So I don't expect it to be super fast. But this last comment that autofilled, that was actually pretty quick. So I think what I'm actually going to do is go back and ask Copilot Chat about the enum. But for now, let's just flip over and take a quick look at the story. So under the story, again, I'm going to wait just a second because I was basically going to prompt it to create some sort of struct for the story item itself. And when I was doing this earlier, just before I deleted the file to start this back up, it actually just auto-completed it for me before I could put in any sort of comment. But it's not doing that for me right now, so let me just kind of work on a comment here. So we want to create a codable struct for a story. You know what? I'm going to wait a second and see if I don't prompt it for anything else, if I don't have to put in all of the rest of the items. I can see down in like the lower right here that it is thinking. It hit temporary issues. So that's probably why it didn't pop back. That's kind of cool that you can see all this. Okay, but I'm not really interested in that. So, well, let's see. The structure had the following properties. Definitely we need an int and a title, URL. So last time, again, I didn't have to do all of this, and it literally filled in all the code, and I was kind of scratching my head a little bit, but then I recognized things like kids and descendants from the documentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and now just accept this this recommendation. Now, it says create a function to get the top stories, and that's exactly what I want to do, but I actually don't want it to be in story in my model. I want that to be in my model view. So I'm going to go ahead and remember that, create a function to get the top stories, and I'm going to go ahead and move over to, let's go ahead and save this, and then I heard that somebody said if you keep your different files open as well, that you want Copilot to take into context, that helps. So I'm just going to open that up. I'm going to open that up. Maybe this, so that we know we've got Firebase in there. And then I need to, I'm going to need to create a new file under ModelView. So again, I'm going to go back to Xcode, and I'm going to create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file, and let's call this TopStoriesModelView. Now, I don't know best practices here. Maybe people put MV or something along those lines. I'll just be verbose right now. So that's going to go in there. And then for giggles, I'm just gonna create a new file and call this stories. Oops, I did that last time. I'm gonna call this stories model view. I feel like there's probably going to be the need to separate those two. All right, so let's pop back over to Copilot in VS Code. And now I've got my model view, and I'm gonna go ahead and open these two. Now I guess they have to open a new tab. Okay, so TopStoriesModelView. Let's see what we get here. Using Firebase, get the top 500 stories. Now I figured I would have to specify, there we go, from Hacker News. And yeah, I'm gonna say that, but I'm gonna kill the pretty print because we don't really need it to pretty print. And I don't want it to get the detail for each story right now because the details, I guess I haven't really thought through it, but the details I was gonna throw in the stories model view, but you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say, get the detailed story view. And this is a specific example of a story. So I'm just gonna accept these, and then let's see, and store the results in an array of story objects. I like that. So I wonder if it can also handle the different imports we might need. Sure. Now this is getting way too detailed, but I'm gonna just see this through real quick because now I'm curious. Because ultimately this is what I want to do, but I'm thinking about, how I want to break this up into different, in the dead. Oh boy. No. I need to stop, but I just can't help clicking tab here. All right, this is not going the way that I want. So let me, okay, I don't want to display anything because this is a model view. So I'm going to just end it there and see. I'm not exactly sure. I guess I don't have to force it to automatically try to complete because this guy kicks off every time. So let's give it a second and see. Okay, looks like we hit that error. Let me try this one more time and see if it'll. Okay, nope. So I'm going to cancel these. And I guess if you just keep hitting enter when it prompts, eventually you'll just get to a new line and it will say, hey, they don't want me to prompt anymore. And it'll try to fetch. So this is not working. I'm going to come back to just a quick reference article that I was looking at on like pulling things into a model view. So this basically creates a class with an observable object so that other views can then get updated. And it publishes some variables and things of that sort. So maybe I'll just kind of try to start a class and let's see what happens. So we're going to import SwiftUI, and I think that I need to import Firebase. Maybe I can ask Copilot Chat. Okay, so I'm just asking it how I can import and initialize the database for an iOS app. Okay, so we already added the Firebase SDK in the previous one. So up here, I'm gonna, maybe it allows me to copy paste. That is copy, nice, all right. So I'm going to put that one in there. The app delegate, we already configured that in the earlier session. And then to use the real-time database, we can get a reference to the database. We don't want to write data, we want to read data. And so this is kind of helpful. I'm going to keep this open. And let's kind of come back to this object idea, right? So we're going to create a class for this model and make it an observable object. And then, we're going to be able to create some variables and some functions where we could maybe prompt it to get the latest stories. All right, so a class that's the model and observable object. All right, let's do a class TopStoriesModelView. Let's make it observable object. So right now, I don't think that I have the Swift LSP. Well, there's a nice little autocomplete. I don't think I have the Swift LSP working, so it's not like auto-completing observable object the way that Xcode would. I think that it can. There was a couple of steps involved, and I haven't taken the time to do that. So let me just pause for a second and look at this, because over here we've got the observable object, and then he's got some published variables again and some functions. Oh shoot, it lost the prompt. Let's see if we can get that back. Okay, so we've got a published var stories, which is going to be initializing an array of story, which is good. And then on the init, oh, cool. So on the init, we've got a database. And here it's kind of interesting to look at this, right? Because in the sample code that the Copilot Chat brought back, you could see, a generic example. I remember looking at some of the other Git repos out there, and I just kind of took a look at some of the other code, and people were kind of specifically commenting on how you need to initialize the DB collection, and I think there's something in there about like V0. But anyway, I'm going to hold off. So this is pulling in a collection. It's getting the documents. Okay, if there's an error, it's going to print it out. Otherwise, snapshot. I'm not actually familiar with that. I have seen that in somebody else's code. Obviously, that's probably what Firebase is passing back. And then for each document in the snapshot, it's going to create a new story. And if I come back to our story model, what did we create? We created one that's got ID, title, URL, by, time, score, descendants, and kids. Yeah, okay, cool. It got actually all of those. And then it's going to append that. And, for giggles, just from a traditional debugging here for developers, I'm going to go ahead and print out the story. Okay, so let's save this. All right, everything's saved. Let's pop back over to Xcode. Okay, cool. There's the code. Now let's build it over here real quick and see if it builds. Ah, build failed. Bummer. Let's try to figure out why. It's not telling me why. Cannot find Firestore in scope in TopStoriesModelView. Let DB equal, Firestore. Oh, shoot. Okay, so maybe I don't need Firebase. The database, I need Firestore. Let's ask Copilot Chat that. How do I use Firebase? No, Firestore in an iOS app, how do I not use, how do I include? Okay, Firebase SDK, import Firebase. Okay, so we're good there. Configured, that's good. Let db equal firestore.firestore. Firebase.app configure. Let's come back to GitHub let's come back to Xcode real quick. And again, the error actually doesn't show up in the normal section that I would think. Cannot find Firestore. Maybe it needs to be Firebase.firestore. Or possibly when I added this package, oh no, I don't. Yeah, here's Firebase iOS SDK. I wonder how you tweak this, because there was basically I want to update and see if I can include the Firestore stuff. Let's see. I mean, I guess brute force would be removing it. Let's see. Firebase. Maybe there's a way we can accessing fire source. Okay. So this looks like a whole bunch of different packages. I thought I only selected one or two, or one in the previous one. Here's Firestore. Let's see. Okay, well, this is silly because I'm wasting time. So let's do a quick check here and say how to update Firebase iOS components included. Let's see. How to update? No. How to add additional Firebase components to iOS project. Okay, yeah, this guy had the same problem I did, which was needed to add more. The only way he could figure out was to remove it. So go to the Frameworks, Libraries, and Embedded Content section in your target application, add the button, and you'll find it. Okay, Frameworks, Libraries, and Embedded Content. So let's come back up here. Okay, we got frameworks. Here we go. We got Firebase database, and then looks like I can. Oh, there we go. A lot easier. So Firestore. I don't know the difference between Firestore and Firestore Swift, so I'm just going to start with Firestore. And then, I don't know, we'll see if that works. Let's try building. Build failed. Okay, non-zero exit code, cannot find Firestore in scope. Okay, you know what? Let's ask GitHub. I gotta get that error message again. Cannot find Firestore in scope. How do I resolve cannot find Firestore in scope? All right, let's see. Okay, we got import Firebase, we've got configure, clean build. Oh yeah, project, build, clean build folder. All right, otherwise delete it and re-add it. Let's try that real quick. Project, clean build folder, clean it. All right, and now let's force a new build. Oh wow, build succeeded, woohoo. And then we could run it. And we've got hello world. But I probably don't have any way to trigger this new code. Okay, so very excited that this thing actually built and successfully ran after we got that little tip from Stack Overflow, but then I realized I actually don't have a way to trigger this code in the top stories model view. So that'll be the next thing that I do. I'll connect it up, and so that way maybe when the this particular view loads, we'll see that debug data. But anyway, I think this is a great place to end. If you've done anything with like DSLR cameras or mirrorless cameras, you may be aware of that annoying feature where after 30 minutes your video recording cuts off. And so I find that like really a big problem. And I researched it at one point, and the reality of it is it's not about like overheating or the file size is too big. There's like different taxes and tariffs that happen if you're categorized as a video equipment instead of a camera. And so a lot of these cameras just automatically cut off at 29 minutes and 59 seconds. There's some hacks and workarounds, but I figure for this kind of session, this is actually really great so that I spend 30 minutes, I work on a particular problem, and I see how far I get. And I'm actually pretty happy with where I got. I was able to use the previous work of getting Firebase into the app, kind of reasoned through a couple of different ways to structure my project with different models and model views. And then I went out there to create those, and as I was thinking, several of them just kind of filled in and completed the way that I think that I wanted. Again, that is in part probably because there's a number of open source Hacker News clients out there, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe this is just the power of a large language model. And I think where things really ended up shining is when I created those model views, and after a little bit of prompting and breaking the problem down from like not just an overall, like here's a blank file or here's a couple of comments, but creating that observable class. Once I created that, then it completed with, I think, exactly the code that I need. I mean, we'll see here in the next session. And along the way, I was jumping out a little bit to Google and doing like Stack Overflow stuff, which was helpful. It did resolve the issues. And that's really like, I don't know, 25, 30 years of muscle memory coming in. But a few times I kind of caught myself and just went into GitHub Copilot Chat, the preview, and asked it questions. And you know what? I found that it actually came back and really gave me the advice that I need. And if I recall correctly, it was actually the clear your build that ended up making the build work. That actually came from the Copilot Chat preview. So anyway, I'm really happy with where things are at. Unfortunately, I have some meetings and other things I need to do, so if I can sneak in 30 more minutes today, I will. Otherwise, stay tuned for more sessions on me building this Hacker News client with Copilot. Thanks so much for watching.